Hey everyone, it's me Beau back once again with another cult movie review. Hope everyone is doing well. Today in this video I'm going to be reviewing the 70s Oscar winning film The Deer Hunter. If you guys like the content that I do here, please consider subscribing. It goes a long way to help me grow the channel. So, The Deer Hunter from 1978 was directed by the late Michael Cimino. The movie was Cimino's second feature film as director, following his debut Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in 1974. Now, I know Cimino had a bit of a troubled career and reputation, but from the work that I've seen him produce over the years, I do rate him as a high caliber filmmaker. There's absolutely no denying that he had a lot of talent and a keen eye for storytelling. As for The Deer Hunter itself, I saw this movie many years ago on TV. At the time, I had just watched Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, another movie centered around the Vietnam War. So watching The Deer Hunter acted as a nice follow-up to that. And when I think of war movies, The Deer Hunter isn't one that immediately comes to mind. Feature films like Platoon or Apocalypse Now would likely be most people's first thought. Now, don't get me wrong, The Deer Hunter is indeed a war movie, but I've always associated the film with the careers of Michael Cimino and actor John Cazale. Those are the two names that spring to mind when I think of The Deer Hunter. But still, comparing this film to its counterparts, I feel The Deer Hunter is the war movie that had the most depth and was more psychologically reaching. While of course the action was perfectly executed, there was a lot more going on in this movie. So the film followed the lives of three steelworkers from Clairton, Pennsylvania. The trio were Michael, played by Robert De Niro, Nick, played by actor Christopher Walken, and Stephen, played by John Savage. They spent their days working in the steel mill and their nights hunting deer in the mountains. At the same time, the Vietnam War was looming large. The trio's lives were then changed forever when they were all drafted into military service. The narrative of the film unfolded into three distinct acts. The first was the peaceful pre-war days in Pennsylvania. They were just a group of guys living their best lives in this close-knit community. Much of Act 1 actually consisted of a wedding between the characters Stephen and Angela. It was indeed a long sequence, and I'll get to that a bit later on in this review, but it did showcase the close bond Mike and the others all shared. Act 2 was where the war aspect and repercussions really came into focus. It showed the harsh realities of the Vietnamese War, with the psychotic death games and dire conditions the friends faced while trying to survive in captivity. We saw the famous Russian roulette game take place inside the prison camp. It was harrowing, but a truly masterful scene that really put emphasis on the casualties of war. I mean, just thinking about it, the whole roulette sequence with all the water everywhere and the cramped conditions, that would have been a real challenge to film, so props to all involved. Now, the final act of The Deer Hunter showed the bleak aftermath of the conflict and its ever-changing impact on the group and their community. They, like so many others at the time, were struggling to come to terms with the trauma and loneliness they felt while trying to piece back together their lives. Now, this was a very basic story structure, but I thought it really worked well with the story Camino was telling. The movie was always about the journey that the characters went on, not just together, but within their own minds. And with this story structure in particular, we saw the changes that the characters developed over the course of the film. It was very clear to see from pre-war to post-war how people's personalities and attitudes changed. You know, the deer hunting trips, for example, that bookended the film, served as a metaphor for the journey that the characters made. We started with innocence and progressed on to experience, with the final trip highlighting the group's loss and the toll the war took on their spirits. You know, I also want to talk about the film's exploration into PTSD. For a film that was released in the late 70s, I thought it was quite commendable for a movie from that era to showcase the issues surrounding post-traumatic stress. I mean, in all fairness, that was quite pioneering for its time. The Deer Hunter also bravely showed the challenges of reintegration that veterans faced upon their return. These guys, these veterans, these war heroes, they were not robots. They were not killing machines. They were humans with thoughts and feelings just like the rest of us. These soldiers, these veterans returned to their communities psychologically scarred by the war. Many did indeed suffer as a consequence. Many were unable to cope or carry on with their lives. You know, back then, many had little to no support at all. And then you have a film like The Deer Hunter coming out on the tail end of 1978 that explored the unfortunate aftermath of the war with its unflinching, unapologetic approach. Let's talk about the actors here for a moment. Featuring the likes of Meryl Streep, John Cazale, Christopher Walken, and of course Robert De Niro, The Deer Hunter was a movie jam-packed with a brilliant cast of performers. Having watched the film back recently, you know, and just kind of looking closely at everyone and everyone's input, you know, there was no bad performances here. Everyone delivered in their respective roles with no actor phoning it in. I mean, you have to kind of think that this movie, this story, you know, it was very character driven, and a film like this needed to have a strong, talented set of actors to make it work. As an ensemble piece, the whole cast did a brilliant job, and Christopher Walken would actually go on to win an Oscar for his performance in The Deer Hunter, something which was fully deserved. Robert De Niro's performance in particular was at times intense and carried a lot of weight. The character suffered through some terrible times, yet he somehow, some way found the strength to keep going, not give up, and keep pushing forward. In a way, Mike kind of acted like the beacon of hope to his friends and to his community. The character showed an array of different emotions throughout the film, and they were all perfectly portrayed and executed by De Niro. You know, at times the actor's performance was quite reserved, showing his emotions through his eyes and facial expressions. While the man's career certainly has declined over time, I don't think anyone can deny how impressive De Niro was back in his heyday in films like this, Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. With all that said, going back to the director Michael Cimino and his reputation, he was known to be quite demanding with his actors, always pushing them to the limit to try and get the best results. Now, another actor I have to mention would be the late John Cazale. Now, this movie, The Deer Hunter, would actually mark the last on-screen appearance from the actor. At the time of filming, Cazale had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and was indeed very sick. Yeah, this was very apparent, as you could see in the film, as Cazale looked very skinny and gaunt. Now, I personally love John Cazale's filmography. It was very limited, but brilliant nonetheless. Of course, John Cazale is best remembered for his role in the first two Godfather movies. But with films like this and A Dog Day Afternoon, it was clear that Cazale was a truly talented actor. Yeah, it's an utter shame that the man's life was cut so short. But for me, you know, trying to focus on the positives, hey, what a movie to end your career with, The Deer Hunter. Cazale's character, Stanley, had this lingering sadness that surrounded him throughout the whole film, and underlying sense of dejection that felt very authentic. Knowing the actor had already been given a terminal diagnosis before production even began, I imagine it was easy for Cazale to project his character, Stanley, and his misery on screen, given Cazale's real life predicament. Upon researching this movie, I found out that Cazale actually passed away before the film was ever completed. Now, this for me, hearing this news, you know, it saddens me, because it meant that Cazale never got the opportunity to watch the final product. It's just kind of bittersweet, because like in all his films, John Cazale gave such a brilliant performance, and yeah, it's just sad that, you know, he was never able to actually see it all play out on screen. And, you know, on top of that, it would have been nice for Cazale to have lived a bit longer, to have seen all the success the movie garnered, you know, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Now, before we get to dislikes, I have to give some love to the cinematographer, the late Vilmos Zsigmond. The incredibly talented cinematographer did indeed capture some wonderful imagery throughout the movie. While I think his later work in Michael Cimino's western Heaven's Gate was superior, there's no taking away this man's stunning work that he produced for The Deer Hunter. Strong visuals from a competent cinematographer will always vastly improve a film's overall quality. And with The Deer Hunter, that was absolutely no exception. Zsigmond's work reminded me of paintings that you would see sometimes, you know, on a wall in an art gallery. Perfectly crafted by an artist, a true artist that had a keen eye for detail. So, dislikes for The Deer Hunter, 1978. My main dislike for this movie would be the overall pacing of the film. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the film's grand scope with its strong characters and stunning visuals. Clearly, a lot of money had gone into this project and it certainly showed on screen. But the slow pacing that we saw, especially in Act 1 during the wedding, that to me seemed overkill. I appreciated the character development, but with all things considered, I felt that it just didn't need to linger on so much. Specifically as in, I feel there could have been 10, maybe even 15 minutes of footage that could have been cut, edited out, and I feel it would not have affected the story in any way. From what I read actually online, it seemed that the movie studio was somewhat unhappy with the original runtime, but allowed Cimino and editor Peter Zinner to continue on with their 184-minute version. Cimino was allowed to do what he did, and obviously, Oscar-winning movie, reaped all the awards, big success. So in that sense, Cimino was right in this instance to do what he did. With all that said, I still think that the slow pacing deters people from repeat viewings, especially for modern audiences. I know when it comes to myself, I tend to rewatch certain scenes from The Deer Hunter rather than actually the whole film. A sleeker, more refined version would have been preferred. And so, ratings for The Deer Hunter 1978. Going to be rating this movie a solid 7 out of 10. When it comes to cinematic masterpieces that have left a lasting impression on their audience, The Deer Hunter is no doubt one of them. It's a powerfully haunting film that delved into the themes of friendship, loyalty, and the harrowing effects of war. The Deer Hunter is a film that explored the deep bonds of friendship and sacrifice the group made for one another in times of extreme adversity. The film's message about the futility of war and its devastating consequences for individuals and communities remains relevant today as it did back then. With the movie's evocative storytelling and performances, the film remains a timeless classic that deserved all the award recognition it got. When I think about this movie, The Deer Hunter does serve as a reminder to everyone of the importance of peace and the need to avoid such conflicts at all costs. I don't know who said it, but that famous line, you have to learn from your history, otherwise you're doomed to repeat it. Now, if you're watching this and you have seen this movie, please let me know what you thought in the comment section below. It's always great to hear your guys' thoughts. For those who have not seen this yet, I highly recommend it. It's definitely worth your time. It's a somber movie, and it's not something that you'd necessarily kind of go out and watch repeatedly. But it is an important piece of American cinema that all film lovers should go and experience at least once. Well, that's all from me today, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this review. I will be back very soon with more cult movie reviews. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, take care. I'll see you all very soon.